7. Signs the creators of the dark chosen ones are targeting you. It always starts with something subtle, a shift in your reality that no one else seems to notice. You wake up one day and the world feels different. Not in a dramatic, obvious way, but like everything around you has been slightly reprogrammed. People you once trusted begin to act strangely. Your thoughts become heavier, as if something external is pressing against your clarity. And deep in your gut, you sense it. Something is watching you, something ancient, calculated, not random, not blind, but precise, intentional, as if you've been marked, as if your very presence has disrupted a system that wasn't meant to be disturbed. And that's when it begins, the targeting, not by accident, but because you've been identified as a threat to an agenda that thrives in secrecy. Let's get something straight. There are forces in this universe that do not want you to awaken, forces that operate in dimensions beyond the physical, energies that influence systems, people, and outcomes from behind the veil. They are not chaotic, they are not stupid, they are architects, and they work through what we might call the dark chosen ones. These are individuals often unaware of their own role who have been energetically wired to uphold control, confusion, and separation. Their creators, those ancient intelligences, don't care about morality, they care about frequency, influence, and containment. And when you begin to break free from the containment field of collective programming, you become visible to them, not physically, but energetically. You ping on their radar like a glitch in the simulation. You become the anomaly, the variable, the risk.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The first sign you're being targeted is psychological distortion. Suddenly, your mind becomes a battlefield. You may find yourself second-guessing everything about yourself, not just decisions, but your essence, your worth, your intuition. You'll hear internal voices that don't feel like yours. You'll feel pulled toward guilt, shame, or irrational fear, even when your external life appears fine. That's not just anxiety, that's infiltration. One of the first tactics the creators of the dark chosen ones use is subtle mental interference. They don't need to destroy you, they just need to get you to doubt yourself. Because self-doubt is a frequency that lowers your vibration just enough to make you manipulable, just enough to keep your gifts dormant. So I ask you, when was the last time you truly trusted your inner voice without apology? If it's been a while, ask yourself why. The second sign is energetic surveillance. You begin to feel watched. Not in a paranoid way, but in that quiet, eerie sense that your spiritual progress is being monitored. You'll notice strange synchronicities that feel engineered rather than organic. People may randomly enter your life with intense energy, only to leave you drained or confused. These are often what I call inserts. People sent into your field to destabilize you emotionally or energetically. Some are conscious, most are not. They don't know they're being used, but they are. And the moment your vibration starts to rise, they show up. Not coincidentally, strategically. Because the creators of the dark, chosen ones, understand something most people don't. Emotional disruption equals spiritual delay. Every time you lose your center, you delay your next level of awakening. That's the game. The third sign is identity shattering. You'll begin to lose your taste for your old life. The goals you once chased will feel empty, your relationships will feel misaligned, you'll feel like a stranger in your own story. This isn't depression, it's energetic disassembly. You're being stripped of your false identities because your authentic power threatens the control grid, and in that liminal space, before the new identity has formed, you are most vulnerable. This is when the dark creators send in their most subtle attacks, through dreams, through people, through thoughts that seem harmless but carry a frequency of defeat. The key here is awareness. You must recognize that this disorientation is a sacred sign. It means you're close. It means you're breaking through. Do not try to rebuild the old you. Let it fall. Let it burn. Because the version of you that's coming is the one they fear. The fourth sign is time distortion. You'll begin to notice that time either speeds up or slows down around you. Days will disappear, hours will stretch, you'll feel out of sync with the collective clock. This is because your consciousness is expanding beyond linear frameworks. The creators of the dark, chosen ones, thrive in predictability and routine. They rely on your attachment to time, control, and logic. When you begin to operate outside of those constraints, you become unpredictable. You start collapsing timelines, you start bending probability, and that is a direct threat to their programming. So they try to pull you back with distractions, urgent tasks, emotional dramas, financial stress. Anything to anchor you back into linear density. But if you can hold your frequency, if you can remain present even when time feels like it's folding around you, you'll begin to access the higher timelines they don't want you to reach. The fifth sign is the warping of truth. You'll begin to notice that your words are misunderstood more often. You'll say something pure, and it will be received as threatening. You'll speak truth and people will label it arrogance or delusion. Why? Because when you begin to carry a certain frequency of clarity, it disrupts the illusions others are still married to. And the dark creators don't attack you with weapons, they attack your reputation, your credibility, your voice. They turn others against you subtly, sometimes even those closest to you. This is why many awakened beings walk alone, not because they dislike people, but because they've lived through betrayal orchestrated by unseen hands. But let me be clear, your voice is not the problem. Your clarity is the medicine, and the more they try to silence you, the more confirmation you receive that your words matter. Edmigmeis. The sixth sign is the sudden amplification of your shadow. Old wounds, traumas, and fears you thought you'd healed suddenly re-emerge with new intensity, not because you're failing, but because your light has grown so strong that it's now illuminating the deepest layers. And the dark creators know this moment well. They wait for it, because this is when most people give up. They mistake the resurfacing of pain as regression, when in fact it's metamorphosis. You are not breaking down, you are breaking open. And the only way to complete the upgrade is to face what's been buried, not with fear, but with presence. This is how you reclaim your soul's fragments. This is how you become whole. And finally, the seventh sign is the arrival of the test. There will come a moment, a conversation, a decision, a crossroads, where you will be asked to choose between comfort and truth, between fitting in and standing alone, between staying silent or speaking what others won't. This is the final filter. the moment the creators of the dark, chosen ones watch closest, because they know that if you pass this test, you become untouchable, not because you're perfect, but because you've remembered who you truly are. So I ask you, are you willing to be misunderstood, to be alone for a while, to let go of the version of you that made others comfortable? Because if you are, then you're not being targeted because you're weak. You're being targeted because you're powerful. You're the variable they can't control. You're the unspoken prophecy they hoped would stay asleep, but now you're awake. The frequency war, how your energy has become a threat to their system. What if I told you this entire reality, the one most people live in without question, is not just a physical construct, but an energetic grid designed to regulate perception? What if the structures we've been taught to trust, education, media, even certain forms of spirituality, are not neutral, but finely tuned mechanisms that keep consciousness within a controlled bandwidth? You see, this isn't just a battle of politics or ideologies. This is a frequency war, a war that doesn't use bullets but beliefs, a war not fought with armies but with vibration. And if you're watching this, your energy has already begun to disrupt the system. You've become a walking anomaly, a signal that refuses to sync with the artificial rhythm of the collective trance. Here's what they don't want you to realize. Your energy is not passive. It's emissive. It transmits. Every thought, every emotion, every intention you hold, especially when it's rooted in truth, sends out a signal that pierces the veil, and when enough of us awaken to who we are, that signal becomes a resonant field, a wave that begins to override the false codes embedded in society. That's why you're being targeted, not because you're weak, but because your frequency has become dangerous to the architecture of control. You're no longer just living in the matrix, you're rewriting it. Think about how the system responds when you start to raise your vibration. Everything intensifies, not just externally, but internally. Old wounds flare up. People you thought were allies begin to shift. Your body starts to detox. Your sleep gets erratic, and your thoughts become louder. This isn't a coincidence. It's a feedback loop. The moment you step outside the default frequency, the system tries to pull you back down, not because it's sentient in the way we understand sentience, but because it's coded to maintain equilibrium, and your awakening is a disturbance to that equilibrium. But here's the deeper truth. The creators of the dark chosen ones don't fear your actions. They fear your state of being. Because when you hold a high vibration consistently, despite the chaos, despite the attack, you begin to broadcast an entirely different template for reality. You become a living frequency field that others unconsciously attune to. You walk into a room and without saying a word, you shift the energy. You break spells. You dissolve illusions. You wake people up just by existing, and to the forces that rely on unconsciousness to survive, that is unforgivable. So they push back. Not always violently, sometimes subtly, through distractions, through doubt, through people close to you suddenly turning strange, through opportunities that look shiny but feel off. This is the sophistication of the targeting. It doesn't always feel like an attack. Sometimes it feels like a gift. But if you're not in tune with your energetic discernment, you'll mistake a trap for a blessing. That's why your intuition is your most powerful weapon in this war. Logic can be hacked. Language can be manipulated. But frequency, that doesn't lie. Ask yourself this: how many times have you ignored your inner knowing because it didn't make sense? How often have you stayed in situations that felt wrong simply because they looked right? Every time you do that, you give the system a foothold back into your field. You hand over your sovereignty in exchange for comfort. And that's the real battlefield, not out there, but in here. Your choices, your alignment, your willingness to trust the invisible over the noise. But here's the paradox. The more you raise your frequency, the more invisible you become to their control mechanisms. It's like tuning into a radio station they don't have access to. You move differently, you think in layers. You no longer vibrate in fear, which means their primary tool, manipulation, loses its grip. You see through games that others still fall for. You speak truth in rooms built on lies, and in doing so, you don't just protect your field, you begin to reprogram the collective field. This is why your awakening isn't just personal, it's planetary. You are part of a much larger network of beings, some incarnated, some not, who are remembering their role in this frequency war. We are not here to fight in the old ways, we are here to vibrate, to hold such a potent frequency of truth, love, and clarity that the entire system begins to collapse under the weight of its own distortion. That is how the dark creators lose, not through resistance, but through resonance. So I'll ask you again, are you willing to become a problem in the system? Not by shouting, not by rebelling in the old sense, but by becoming so clear, so sovereign, so awake, that your very presence becomes a glitch in the matrix. Are you willing to be that mirror, that pulse of reality in a sea of simulation? Because if you are, then you've already won more than you know. The infiltration code, how they use people closest to you as portals. It's one of the hardest lessons on the path of awakening. Realizing that not all attacks come from outside. Some of the most destabilizing, confusing, and spiritually disorienting intrusions don't come from dark entities in distant realms or shadowy figures in positions of global power. No, they come from the people closest to you, your friends, your family, your lovers, your teachers. And in many cases, they don't even realize what's happening. But if you're truly awakening, if your frequency is rising and your field is becoming more sovereign, then you must understand this. The system uses people as portals. It's not about possession in the way movies show it. It's about energetic access points. Every human being carries both conscious and unconscious programming. And when someone still lives from their unhealed trauma, their suppressed pain, their unresolved karmic cycles, they unknowingly become a transmitter for frequencies that aren't theirs. That's what makes it so difficult to detect. You'll be speaking to someone you love, someone you've known for years, and suddenly their energy shifts. The conversation becomes oddly confrontational. They say something that cuts deeper than usual. They make you question yourself in a way that feels precise, surgical, almost otherworldly. And you're left asking, where did that come from? That is the infiltration code at work. These dark creators don't need to attack you head on. They just need to find a weak spot in your emotional armor. And who better to access that than someone you've already opened your heart to, someone whose voice you trust, whose presence you've let into your field without filters. This is spiritual warfare too. It's not about dramatic rituals or obvious enemies. It's about energetic manipulation through proximity. Now, this is where it gets nuanced. Not every argument, not every emotional trigger is a sign of infiltration. We're still human, we still have egos, wounds, and shadows. But when the energy behind a conversation feels off, when it feels like the person speaking to you is delivering a script designed to destabilize your clarity, it's time to pause. Not to judge them, not to cut them off in anger, but to observe the frequency, because frequency never lies. You might notice patterns. Certain people only reach out when you're about to make a leap forward. They only show up when you're launching a new creative project, stepping into a deeper level of truth, or embodying a higher version of yourself. And their presence, no matter how subtle, brings confusion, doubt, guilt. This is not random. This is targeted. These are not always bad people. Many are loving souls, walking their own path, completely unaware that their unresolved pain is being used as a carrier-way for interference. But whether intentional or not, the impact is the same. Your field becomes compromised. So what do? We don't isolate ourselves. We don't become paranoid. That's another trap. The system wants you to push everyone away out of fear. It wants you to live in suspicion and hypervigilance, because fear lowers your frequency just as much as manipulation. The solution isn't retreat, it's refinement. You must become energetically literate. You must know the difference between a conversation that challenges you and one that drains you, between someone calling you higher and someone unconsciously pulling you back into loops you've outgrown. This is where discernment becomes your shield. Not judgment, not arrogance, but energetic discernment. Can you sit with someone in love, even as you recognize that their current vibration is incompatible with your path? Can you release the need to fix, to explain, to be understood? Because sometimes the most powerful move isn't confrontation, it's detachment. It's stepping back with grace, reclaiming your energy, and protecting your field without closing your heart. And here's the deeper layer. Sometimes you are the portal. We all are at some point. We've all said things from a wounded place, projected our fear onto others, tried to hold someone back because their growth triggered something unhealed in us. This is why humility is essential. You cannot navigate this war with ego. You must be willing to check your own field constantly, cleanse your energy, question your motives. Ask yourself, is this coming from love or control, expansion or fear? The more honest you are with yourself, the less susceptible you become to being used by forces you don't understand. Because here's the truth. When you become sovereign, the system loses access. When you heal your wounds, you close the portals. When you stop needing to be liked, validated, or understood, you become unhackable. And this is what terrifies them. Not your beliefs, not your presence, but your unshakable presence. Your ability to hold your frequency no matter who walks into the room or what they carry with them. So if you've been feeling alone, if you've been questioning your sanity after strange interactions with people you love, if you've been wondering why your relationships feel more unstable the more you grow, know this. You're not crazy. You're becoming clear. You're seeing what the system tried to keep hidden, and that clarity is your liberation. But the real question is, are you willing to love people and still protect your energy? To forgive them and still walk away? To honor their humanity while refusing to play their energetic games? Because if you are, then you've already begun to master one of the most advanced spiritual skills on this planet. You are no longer just awakening. You are learning how to navigate the matrix as a sovereign soul, and that changes everything. The final confrontation, choosing your timeline in a world of illusions. At some point in this journey, the path narrows, the distractions fall away, the noise from the outside world grows quieter, not because it disappears, but because your inner clarity begins to drown it out. And then it happens. The final confrontation, not with demons, not with governments, not even with the so-called dark creators. The final confrontation is with you, not the surface version of you, but the version that was constructed to survive, to fit in, to make sense in a world built on illusion. That version, the one that learned to dim its light, to conform, to fear its own power, is the last gatekeeper between you and your true timeline. You see, this world is layered. Most people live in the surface timeline, the default code. Go to school, get the job, follow the rules, stay quiet, die safe. But there are infinite other timelines running beneath that script. Timelines where you remember, where you create instead of conform, where your energy bends reality instead of trying to survive it, where you wake up and realize, I am not a character in this simulation, I am the author, and in that moment, when the illusion begins to tremble, the system makes one last attempt to pull you back into sleep. It doesn't come as a monster, it comes as comfort, as logic, as the voice of your old self whispering, don't go too far, don't let go, don't step out of line, because the moment you do, truly do, you enter a timeline where very few walk. A timeline of sovereignty, of creative power, of radical inner peace that can't be bought or broken. And that timeline has a cost. The old you can't come with you. This is what makes the final confrontation so intense. It's not about battling bad guys, it's about choosing your soul over your safety, choosing alignment over approval, choosing to walk alone if that's what it takes. Because by now you've seen behind the curtain, you know that much of what the world calls normal is a hypnotic trance, a script designed to keep you looping in patterns that serve no one except the architects of fear, and now you're standing at the edge. So what does it mean to choose your timeline? It means you stop negotiating with your truth. You stop watering down your intuition to avoid discomfort. You stop trying to fit into systems you were born to disrupt. It means you start living as if your frequency is the law, because in many ways it is. You begin to say no with love. You begin to say yes with clarity. You begin to walk in your purpose even before anyone understands it, because you understand something most people don't. The moment you fully commit to your timeline, reality bends to match it. This is why the dark creators panic when someone begins to awaken, not because you're loud, but because you're free. A free soul in a controlled world is the ultimate threat, not because it fights, but because it transmits. Your freedom gives others permission. Your peace destabilizes the entire illusion. That's why they throw everything at you. Doubt, fear, emotional traps, synthetic timelines that look spiritual but are designed to keep you looped. But none of it can touch you once you've made the internal decision, I will no longer betray myself to be accepted by a system I don't believe in. And once you've made that decision, things begin to accelerate. People fall away, new ones appear. Synchronicities increase. Time itself seems to warp around your choices. The quantum field responds not to who you pretend to be, but to who you actually are. And when you begin to live from that place, deeply, unapologetically, with presence and power, the false timelines collapse. The illusions lose their grip. The simulation begins to glitch. Because you are no longer reacting, you are creating. So I ask you now, in this final moment between timelines, what are you still holding on to that belongs to the old script? Whose approval are you still chasing? What version of yourself are you keeping alive out of fear of being alone, misunderstood, or too powerful? That's the only thing standing between you and the life that's been waiting for you all along. This isn't about perfection, it's about alignment. It's about choosing truth over comfort, clarity over chaos, depth over distraction. It's about realizing that the war was never out there, it was always inside. And now you're ready. You've seen the signs, you've survived the targeting, you've felt the frequency war, you've faced the infiltrations, and now the timelines are splitting. One leads back into sleep, the other leads into sovereignty. The question is not what happens next. The real question is, which version of you is walking out of this moment and into the next reality? Choose wisely, because now they know you're awake, and so does the universe.